He looked at her and saw a problem. He saw a black woman in a hoodie sitting in a restricted office and assumed she was a suspect, a cleaner, or a trespasser. He didn't check her ID. He didn't ask her name. Officer Vance Hargrove simply followed his bias and ordered her to get on her knees. He thought he was cleaning up the trash, but Hargrove made a fatal calculation that day. He didn't realize that the woman he was terrorizing wasn't a criminal. She was Nia Whitaker, the newly appointed federal chief prosecutor for the Western District, and the very woman who had arrived to sign his indictment. Watch closely, because the karma that hits this officer isn't just satisfying, it's a legal apocalypse. The rain in Seattle was relentless, a gray curtain that seemed to wash away everything but the grime on the sidewalk. Nia Whitaker stepped out of the Uber, pulling the hood of her oversized navy blue sweatshirt up to shield her face. She wasn't dressed like the most powerful attorney in the state. She was dressed like a woman who had just stepped off a red-eye flight from Washington, D.C., with her luggage lost by the airline, leggings, running shoes, and a damp hoodie. That was the armor of the United States Attorney for the Western District. As she walked toward the 4th Precinct, Nia, known to her friends as the Hammer that defense attorneys feared back in D.C., had arrived early for her meeting with Captain Elias Thorne. She had come early on purpose. There were rumors about the 4th Precinct, rumors of missing evidence, coerced confessions, and a culture of intimidation that rotted the badge from the inside out. Nia didn't want the parade. She didn't want the polished brass and the rehearsed salutes. She wanted to see the precinct as it truly lived and breathed when no one was watching. She pushed through the double-glass doors. The front desk was unmanned. Strike one. The air smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. She walked past the empty reception, her sneakers squeaking softly on the linoleum, and buzzed herself through the side gate, which had been propped open with a fire extinguisher. Strike two. Security was lax, bordering on negligent. Nia navigated the hallway, her eyes scanning the bulletin boards. She found the office marked Captain E. Thorne. The door was ajar. The lights were off inside, but the blinds were open, letting in the gray morning light. She stepped inside, dropped her wet bag on a chair, and walked over to the bookshelf, examining the framed photos and commendations. She needed to understand the man running this ship before she dismantled it. She picked up a framed photo of the captain shaking hands with the mayor. "Make yourself at home, why don't you?" The voice was a growl, low, gravelly, and dripping with hostility. Nia turned around slowly. Standing in the doorway was a mountain of a man, Officer Vance Hargrove. She didn't know his name yet, but she knew the type. He was heavy-set, his uniform straining at the gut, holding a steaming styrofoam cup of coffee. His face was flushed, a map of broken capillaries that hinted at high blood pressure or too many nights at the local dive bar. His name tag read, V. Hargrove, Senior Officer. "Good morning," Nia said, her voice calm and professional. She placed the photo back on the shelf. "I'm waiting for Captain Thorne." Hargrove stepped into the room. He didn't walk, he encroached. He took up space, using his size as a weapon. He looked Nia up and down, his eyes lingering on her wet hoodie, her leggings, her natural hair pulled back in a simple puff. He sneered. "Captain's not in," Hargrove said, taking a sip of his coffee, never breaking eye contact. "And he doesn't take meetings with civilians before 8, especially not ones who wander in off the street." "I have an appointment," Nia said. "Sure you do." Hargrove laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Just like the guy in the holding cell has an appointment with the president. Let me guess, you're here to complain about a parking ticket. Or maybe your boyfriend got picked up last night for possession, and you're here to cry about how he's a good boy." Nia felt the familiar heat rise in her chest, the same steel that had won her convictions against cartel leaders and corrupt senators, but she pushed it down. She wanted to see how far he would go. "I'm not here for any of that," Nia replied. "I'm here for a federal review. If you could just let the captain know I'm here when he arrives." "Federal review?" Hargrove interrupted, his voice mocking. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. The smell of stale tobacco and mint gum was overpowering. "You expect me to believe that you are a Fed?" He pointed a thick, sausage-like finger at her chest. "Get out." "Excuse me?" "I said get out. This is a restricted office. You're trespassing. I don't know how you got past the desk, but you're leaving now." Nia stood her ground. She was 5'7", significantly smaller than Hargrove, but she stood with the posture of a woman who commanded courtrooms. "Officer," Nia said, using his name for the first time, "I advise you to lower your tone. My name is Nia Whitaker. I am the United States Attorney." Hargrove stared at her for a second. Silence hung in the air. Then he threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud, barking laugh that echoed into the hallway. "United States Attorney!" he shouted to the empty room. "Did you hear that? We got the United States Attorney in a hoodie." He gestured wildly. "Hey, Quinn, get in here." A younger officer, lanky and looking tired, appeared at the door. "What's going on, Vance?" "This woman," Hargrove gestured to Nia with his thumb, "claims she's the United States Attorney, says she's here for a review. I caught her snooping in the captain's office." Officer Riley Quinn looked at Nia. He looked unsure. "Ma'am, do you have ID?" Nia reached for her bag on the chair. "Hands!" Hargrove roared, his hand dropping to his holster. "Don't you reach for that bag." Nia froze. The dynamic had shifted instantly. This wasn't just rude anymore. It was dangerous. "Officer, my credentials are in the side pocket," Nia said, her voice icy. "I don't care what you say is in there," Hargrove spat. "You're acting suspicious. You're trespassing in a high-security zone. Back away from the bag. Put your hands on your head. Turn around." "Officer Hargrove," Nia said, "you are making a career-ending mistake." "The only mistake I made was not cuffing you the second I saw you," Hargrove snarled. He unclipped his radio. "Dispatch, send a female officer to the captain's office for a pat-down. We have a 1031, trespassing and impersonating a federal officer." He looked at Nia with pure, unadulterated contempt. It was the look of a man who had held power over people like her for decades and never faced a consequence. "Turn around." Nia Whitaker turned around slowly, lacing her fingers behind her head. Her heart was hammering, not from fear, but from a rage so cold it burned. She had spent 15 years climbing the legal ladder. She had graduated at the top of her class at Harvard Law. She had taken down organized crime rings in Chicago. And yet, in this office, to this man, she was just a body to be controlled. She stared at the beige wall in front of her. She could hear Hargrove breathing heavily behind her. "Quinn, check that bag," Hargrove ordered. "Vance, maybe we should just let her show us her ID first," Quinn suggested, his voice wavering. "If she is who she says she is," Hargrove snapped, "she ain't who she says she is. Rookie, look at her. Does she look like a federal prosecutor to you? Prosecutors wear suits. They drive Mercedes. They don't walk in here soaking wet, looking like they just came from a homeless shelter." The sound of a zipper. Quinn was rummaging through her bag. "I see a laptop," Quinn said. "Some files. Wow. Okay, there's a badge case here." "Fake?" Hargrove dismissed immediately. "You can buy those on Amazon. What else?" "It looks real," Quinn said, sounding alarmed. "Department of Justice. United States Attorney Nia Whitaker." "Give me that," Hargrove grunted. Nia heard the heavy footsteps, then the rustle of leather. "See?" Hargrove's voice took on a triumphant, sneering tone. "Look at the lamination. Cheap. And the photo. It's probably photoshopped. This is a prop. What are you really doing here, sweetheart? Trying to steal files? Intel for a gang?" Nia spoke to the wall. "That is a federal credential, officer. Tampering with it is a felony. Detaining a federal officer without cause is a felony. You are currently stacking up charges that will put you away for 10 years. Hargrove grabbed her shoulder and spun her around. The force was unnecessary and painful. He shoved his face close to hers. "You listen to me," he hissed, spittle flying. "You don't have rights here, not until I say you do. You come into my house, you disrespect my badge, and you think lying about being a Fed is going to save you? I'm going to book you for trespassing, resisting arrest, and impersonating an officer. You're going to spend the weekend in the tank with the drunks and the hookers, and then we'll see how high and mighty you feel." Officer Quinn tried to intervene. "The captain is due in 10 minutes. If there's even a 1% chance—" "Shut up, Quinn," Hargrove barked. "This is why you're still walking a beat. No instincts. I've been doing this 20 years. I know a criminal when I see one. She's got guilty written all over her." Hargrove grabbed his handcuffs. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Nia didn't move. "I am not resisting, but I am not complying with an unlawful order. I am asking you to call your watch commander." "I am the watch commander right now," Hargrove grinned, a cruel, teeth-baring expression. "And I say you're going down." He grabbed her wrist, twisting it violently behind her back. Nia gasped. The pain was sharp. He slapped one cuff on, then yanked her other arm. Click. The metal bit into her skin. He shoved her forward, forcing her chest down onto the captain's desk. "There," Hargrove said, panting slightly. "Now you look like you belong." He keyed his radio again. "Cancel the female officer. Suspect is secured. I'm taking her down to holding myself." "You really don't want to do that," Nia said, her cheek pressed against the polished wood of the desk. She could see the reflection of the room. She could see Quinn looking terrified. "Watch me," Hargrove said. He grabbed her by the upper arm, hauling her upright. "Let's go, and if you trip, I'm not catching you." He marched her out of the office. The precinct was waking up. More officers were filtering in for the day shift. They stopped and stared. A senior officer, a white man, dragging a petite black woman in handcuffs through the bullpen. It was a scene they had seen 1,000 times. Most looked away, indifferent. Some smirked. "Caught another one, Vance?" An officer passing by asked, holding a donut. "Caught a live one?" Hargrove bragged. "Tried to tell me she was the United States attorney. Can you believe the nerve?" Laughter rippled through the room. "Yeah," another officer chimed in, "and I'm the King of England." Nia memorized every face, every laugh, every officer who looked down at their paperwork instead of intervening. She was building a list. Hargrove shoved her toward the elevator that led to the basement holding cells. He pressed the button. "You know," Hargrove said, leaning in close to her ear, "you people are all the same, always playing the victim, always trying to hustle your way out. But in here, you're nothing." The elevator doors dinged open, but it wasn't empty. Standing inside the elevator were 3 people. In the center was Captain Elias Thorne, looking crisp in his white shirt and gold badge. To his left was a man in a sharp gray suit, FBI Special Agent in Charge Marcus Kane. To his right was a woman with a stenographer's pad. They were mid-conversation, laughing about something, until they looked up and saw the scene before them. Captain Thorne's smile vanished. He looked at Hargrove. Then he looked at the woman in handcuffs. He looked at her face. He looked at the sweatshirt. And then recognition dawned on him like a bucket of ice water. His face drained of all color. "Vance?" Thorne's voice was a whisper of horror. "Morning, Cap," Hargrove said, puffing his chest out, oblivious to the change in atmosphere. "Caught this one snooping in your office. Claimed she was a Fed. I'm taking her down to cool off. Charged her with impersonation." Hargrove smiled, expecting a commendation. Silence. Absolute suffocating silence. Agent Marcus Kane stepped forward. He didn't look at Hargrove. He looked at Nia. "Ms. Whitaker?" Kane asked, his voice stunned. Nia straightened her posture despite the cuffs. She looked Hargrove dead in the eye, then shifted her gaze to the captain. "Good morning, Captain Thorne," Nia said calmly. "I believe we had an appointment. I apologize for the attire. My luggage was lost. But your officer here," she gestured with her chin toward Hargrove, "decided that my wardrobe was probable cause for arrest." Hargrove's smile faltered. He looked from Kane to the captain. "Ms. Whitaker?" Captain Thorne stepped out of the elevator. He was trembling. "Officer Hargrove, uncuff her now." "Cap, she's lying," Hargrove stammered, but the confidence was leaking out of him like air from a punctured tire. "She's wearing a hoodie. She broke in." "Uncuff her, you idiot," Thorne screamed, his voice cracking. "That is the United States attorney. That is the woman who is leading the corruption task force." Hargrove's hands went numb. He looked at Nia. Really looked at her. He saw the intelligence in her eyes, the steel, the badge he had called a fake. His fingers fumbled with the key. He dropped it. It clattered on the floor. I didn't know," Hargrove whispered. He bent down to pick up the key, his hands shaking so hard he couldn't get it into the lock. "Allow me," Agent Kane said, snatching the keys from Hargrove's sweating hand. He quickly unlocked the cuffs. Nia rubbed her wrists. There were red welts where the metal had dug in. She didn't say a word. She just adjusted her hoodie, smoothed her hair, and looked at Hargrove. He was shrinking. The mountain of a man was suddenly very small. "Captain Thorne," Nia said, her voice echoing in the silent bullpen. "I think we need to have our meeting, and I want Officer Hargrove to join us. In fact, I want everyone to hear this." The bullpen of the 4th Precinct was usually a chaotic symphony of ringing phones, shouting officers, and clacking keyboards. Now it was a graveyard. Every officer had stopped what they were doing. They stood by their desks, eyes wide, watching the drama unfold near the elevators. Officer Vance Hargrove stood alone in the center of the circle that had naturally formed. He looked like a man who had just woken up in a nightmare. Sweat was beading on his forehead, trickling down into his collar. Nia Whitaker stood by the captain's side. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Officer Hargrove," Nia began, her voice projecting clearly, "you said something interesting to me in that office. You said, 'I know a criminal when I see one.'" Hargrove swallowed hard. "Ma'am, it was a misunderstanding. Standard protocol. You were in a restricted area." "Standard protocol?" Nia repeated. "Is it standard protocol to address a citizen as sweetheart? Is it standard protocol to assume a badge is fake because of the color of the holder's skin? Is it standard protocol to twist a suspect's arm when they are offering no resistance?" "I was protecting the precinct," Hargrove mumbled, looking at his boots. "No," Nia said, "you were protecting your ego." She walked over to the nearest desk and picked up a file, her file, which Quinn had left there. She pulled out a document. "I came here early this morning, not just to meet the captain," Nia said, addressing the room. "I came here because for months my office has been conducting a covert investigation into the 4th Precinct's narcotics unit." A ripple of shock went through the room. Hargrove's head snapped up. "We have evidence of drug skimming. We have evidence of planted evidence. And we have evidence of a protection racket run by senior officers." Nia held up the document. "This is a federal indictment. It lists 5 officers who are to be taken into custody immediately by Agent Kane and his team." She looked at Hargrove. "Officer Vance Hargrove," she read, "you are listed on count 1, count 3, and count 4, conspiracy to distribute, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, and falsifying police reports." Hargrove's knees actually buckled. He grabbed the edge of a desk to steady himself. You can't," he gasped. "I'm a senior officer. I've got 20 years. "And for 20 years, Nia said, "you've been a bully. You thought you were untouchable. You thought the badge made you a god. But today, officer, the badge is just a piece of metal, and you are just a criminal." She turned to Agent Kane. "Agent, please execute the warrant." "With pleasure," Kane said. He pulled out his own handcuffs, sleek black steel. Hargrove backed away. No, you can't do this. Captain, tell them." Captain Thorne turned his back on Hargrove. "You brought this on yourself, Vance. You treated her like trash because you thought she was nobody. You didn't care about the law. You cared about power." Kane grabbed Hargrove's arm. He didn't twist it. He didn't shove him. He was professional. He spun Hargrove around and cuffed him. "Vance Hargrove, you are under arrest for federal racketeering and civil rights violations," Kane recited. As Hargrove was being led away, he looked at the officers he had worked with for years. He looked for support. He found none. They looked at him with a mixture of fear and disgust. The code of silence had been shattered by the United States attorney in a hoodie. But the story didn't end there. As Hargrove was dragged toward the door, the same door he had tried to throw Nia out of, he stopped. "This is a setup!" he screamed, his face purple. "She planned this. She came in here dressed like that to trap me. It's entrapment." Nia walked over to him. She stood inches from his face. "I didn't dress like this to trap you, Hargrove," she said softly. "I dressed like this because I'm a human being, and that should have been enough for you to treat me with dignity. The fact that it wasn't. That's why you're going to prison." She signaled to Kane, "Get him out of here." Hargrove was hauled out screaming obscenities until the heavy doors slammed shut. Nia took a deep breath. She looked at her wrist. It was bruising. Captain Thorne looked at her, shamefaced. "Ms. Whitaker, I don't know what to say. I am humiliated." "Don't be humiliated, Captain," Nia said, her voice hard. "Be better. This precinct is under federal oversight as of this moment. I want every body cam footage reviewed. I want every arrest report Hargrove signed reopened." She looked around the room at the silent officers. "If any of you have a problem with that," she said, "you can hand in your badges now, because if you act like Hargrove, I will find you and I will prosecute you." Nobody moved. "Good," Nia said. "Now, Captain, do you have any coffee? I've had a very long morning." The holding cell at the federal courthouse was sterile, cold, and smelled of industrial cleaner. Vance Hargrove sat on the metal bench, his hands still cuffed, but his arrogance hadn't fully dissipated. It had curdled into a sour, defensive rage. He wasn't alone. His lawyer, attorney Nolan Graves, was pacing the small room. Graves was the kind of attorney cops hired when they shot someone they shouldn't have. He wore three-piece suits that cost more than a patrol car and had a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You need to shut up, Vance," Graves hissed, checking his watch. "You don't talk to the feds. You don't talk to the press. You don't even talk to your wife until I say so." "She set me up, Nolan," Hargrove growled, kicking the metal toilet. "She came in there looking like a junkie. It was entrapment. I had probable cause to secure the premises." "She's the United States attorney, you idiot," Graves snapped. "She doesn't need probable cause to enter a federal building or a precinct under her jurisdiction. And the optics, you in a crisp uniform twisting the arm of a black woman in a hoodie who turns out to be your prosecutor. It's a PR nightmare. CNN is already parking vans outside." "So fix it," Hargrove demanded. "Call the union. Tell them it's a political hit job. Tell them she's an activist prosecutor coming for the police." "We're doing that," Graves said, smoothing his tie. "But the indictment is heavy, Vance. Racketeering, drug distribution. This isn't just about you being a jerk in the office. They have a paper trail." "They have nothing," Hargrove insisted, though his voice wavered slightly. "Just Quinn. That kid is weak. He'll crack." "Then we make sure he doesn't," Graves said darkly. Meanwhile, 5 floors up, Nia Whitaker was sitting in a conference room that had been turned into a war room. Boxes of files were stacked to the ceiling. Whiteboards were covered in timelines and photos of officers. Agent Marcus Kane walked in looking grim. He placed a tablet on the table in front of Nia. "You need to see this," Kane said. Nia picked up the tablet. It was a body cam video. The location was a dimly lit alleyway behind a nightclub. On the screen, Hargrove was visible, standing over a young man, a college student named Kai Langford. Kai was on his knees, hands raised, crying. He looked terrified. "Please, officer, I didn't do anything," Kai sobbed on the video. "I just walked out the back door." "You fit the description," Hargrove's voice was clear on the audio. "Drug dealer, scum." Then the video showed Hargrove turning off his body cam. But the camera didn't power down immediately. It had a 30-second buffer that recorded video without audio after the switch was hit. In the silence of the buffer recording, Nia watched as Hargrove took a bag of white powder from his own pocket and dropped it into Kai's open backpack. Then he kicked Kai in the ribs hard enough to knock the wind out of him before dragging him up by his hair. Nia set the tablet down. Her hands were trembling, not from fear but from fury. "Kai Langford," Nia said quietly. "I remember that case. He pled out 5 years for possession with intent to distribute. He lost his scholarship. His life was ruined. He's currently working at a car wash in Tacoma," Kane said. "He's terrified of the police." "Bring him in," Nia ordered. "Subpoena him. We're not just getting Hargrove for corruption. We're getting him for every life he destroyed." Nia stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the rainy Seattle skyline. "Hargrove thinks this is about me. He thinks this is personal, because he insulted me. He has no idea. I'm going to peel his life apart layer by layer." The door opened. It was her assistant, Lena. "Ms. Whitaker," Lena said, looking anxious. "You need to see the news. Hargrove's union rep is holding a press conference." Nia turned on the TV in the corner. A burly man with a thick mustache was standing at a podium surrounded by microphones. "This is a witch hunt," the union rep bellowed. "Nia Whitaker has a known bias against law enforcement. She staged a provocation this morning to entrap a decorated officer who has served this city for 20 years. Officer Hargrove is a hero who keeps our streets safe. We will not let him be a pawn in her political game." Nia watched, her expression unreadable. "They want a war," she whispered. "Okay, let's give them a war." In the weeks following the arrest, the narrative was getting muddy. Hargrove was out on bail. His lawyer, Graves, had managed to get a sympathetic judge to set the bond low, citing Hargrove's ties to the community and clean record. Hargrove wasn't staying quiet. He couldn't help himself. He was a man who needed to feel powerful. He started appearing on fringe podcasts and talk radio shows. He never named Nia directly. Graves had warned him about gag orders, but he spoke in dog whistles. "You know," Hargrove said on the Blue Line podcast, leaning into the microphone, "the system is broken. You got people in high places who got there because of quotas, not merit, and they hate guys like me, traditional guys." The host nodded sympathetically. It's reverse racism, Vance. That's what it is. Hargrove smirked. I'm just saying, when I started, the law was the law. Now it's all about feelings and political correctness. While Hargrove was playing the victim, his team was playing dirty. Nia arrived at her apartment late one Friday night. She was exhausted. She unlocked her door and froze. Her apartment had been tossed. Drawers were pulled out. Books were swept off shelves. But nothing of value was missing. Her TV was there. Her jewelry was there. It was a message. On her kitchen counter, secured by a steak knife stabbed into the wood, was a note. Drop the charges, or we drop the files. Nia pulled the knife out, her heart racing. What files? She had nothing to hide. She lived a boring, work-obsessed life. Then her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It was a photo. It was a picture of her younger brother, Trey. Trey had struggled with addiction years ago. He had been clean for years, working as a counselor. The photo showed Trey buying something from a street corner dealer years ago. The caption read, "Would be a shame if the press found out the U.S." Attorney's brother was a junkie, hypocrite. Nia dropped the phone. They were going after her family. She sat on her floor amidst the wreckage of her apartment and dialed Agent Kane. "Marcus," she said, her voice shaking. "They broke in." "I'm on my way," Kane said instantly. "Don't touch anything." "Marcus, wait," Nia said, steeling herself. "They sent me a picture of Trey. They're trying to blackmail me." There was a silence on the line. Then Kane spoke, his voice deadly calm. "Nia, listen to me. They just made a fatal error. Blackmailing a federal official is a mandatory 15 years. They didn't just cross the line. They sprinted over it." "I know," Nia said, standing up. The fear was gone. The cold rage was back. "Hargrove thinks he can scare me. He thinks I'm like the people he bullies in the precinct. He forgot one thing." "What's that?" "I don't negotiate with terrorists." The next morning, Nia called a press conference. She stood at the podium, flanked by Agent Kane and the FBI. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp. "Yesterday," Nia began, looking directly into the cameras, "my home was broken into. My family was threatened. This was an attempt to intimidate me into dropping the charges against Vance Hargrove." The journalist scribbled furiously. "Let me be clear," Nia continued, her voice rising. "I am not intimidated. In fact, I am motivated. And to those who think they can use my brother's past struggles against me, you have underestimated the strength of recovery and the strength of this family. My brother is a hero who overcame addiction. Vance Hargrove is a coward who hides behind a badge to commit crimes." She paused, then dropped the bombshell. "Furthermore, we are upgrading the charges. We have uncovered a ledger." The room went silent. "A ledger," Nia repeated, "kept by Officer Hargrove in a safe deposit box under his wife's maiden name. It details payments, not just from drug dealers, but from human traffickers." A collective gasp went through the room. "Officer Hargrove wasn't just planting drugs," Nia said, her voice disgusted. "He was accepting bribes to look the other way while young women were trafficked through the port. He sold his soul for $3,000 a month." Nia leaned into the mic. "Mr. Graves, if you're watching, I suggest you look at the RICO Act, because we are seizing everything. His house, his pension, his boat, everything." The trial began months later. It was the hottest ticket in Seattle. The courtroom was packed. Hargrove sat at the defense table. He looked smaller now. The swagger was gone. The Blue Line podcast had dropped him the moment the human trafficking charges came out. The union had pulled his funding. He was paying Graves out of pocket, and the money was running dry. Nia didn't take the lead chair. She let her deputy, a sharp attorney named Mark, handle the day-to-day. She sat in the back, watching. She wanted Hargrove to see her. She wanted to be the constant reminder of his mistake. The prosecution's case was a sledgehammer. First, they brought out Quinn. The rookie officer had flipped immediately after the arrest. He sat on the stand, sweating, unable to look at Hargrove. "Officer Quinn," Mark asked, "did you witness Officer Hargrove plant evidence?" "Yes," Quinn whispered, multiple times. "And why didn't you report it?" "Because he told me," Quinn choked up. "He told me that if I ratted, I'd end up dead in a ditch and it would look like a drug deal gone wrong." The jury looked at Hargrove with horror. Hargrove stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. Then came Kai Langford. He walked with a limp, a souvenir from the night Hargrove kicked him. He told his story. He told the jury how Hargrove had destroyed his life for a quota, how he had lost his degree, how he had been labeled a felon. But the final nail in the coffin wasn't a witness. It was the audio. Nia's team had obtained a warrant for Hargrove's phone. They had recovered deleted voicemails. Mark played one for the court. It was a voicemail Hargrove had left for his wife on the day of his arrest, just minutes before Nia walked into the office. "Hey, honey, look, I'm going to be late tonight. I gotta shake down the guys on 5th Street. We need extra cash for the remodel. Don't worry, the captain is clueless. I run this place. I am the law." The phrase hung in the air like a bad smell. It was time for the defense. Graves stood up. He looked defeated. He knew he had nothing. He tried to paint Hargrove as a stressed cop suffering from PTSD. He tried to argue that the ledger was circumstantial. But then Nia decided to take the floor for the cross-examination of the defendant. It was rare for a defendant to testify, but Hargrove's ego demanded it. He insisted on taking the stand to tell his side. Nia walked up to the witness stand. She wore a tailored gray suit. She looked every inch the federal prosecutor. "Mr. Hargrove," Nia said politely, "do you remember the morning we met?" "I do," Hargrove grunted. "You ordered me to get on my knees. You twisted my arm. You called me sweetheart." "I thought you were a threat," Hargrove lied. "Mr. Hargrove," Nia said, stepping closer, "if I had been a white woman in a business suit standing in that office, would you have arrested me?" "Objection," Graves shouted. "That's speculation," the judge said, but the jury had heard the question. They knew the answer. Nia changed tactics. "You claimed on your podcast that you are a traditional officer, that you follow the code." "I do." "Is it part of the code to take money from men who sell women?" Nia asked, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried to the back of the room. "I didn't know what they were doing," Hargrove blurted out. "I just took the envelopes." The courtroom erupted. Graves put his head in his hands. Hargrove realized what he had said a second too late. He had admitted to taking the money. He had confessed to bribery on the stand. Nia smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter who had just sprung the trap. "No further questions, Your Honor." As Nia walked back to her table, she locked eyes with Hargrove. He was pale, shaking. He looked at the jury. They were looking back at him with pure disgust. The verdict came back in hours. Guilty on all counts: racketeering, deprivation of rights, bribery, falsifying records, assault. As the foreman read the verdict, guilty, 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 Hargrove seemed to deflate physically. He slumped in his chair. He looked over at his wife in the gallery. She was crying, but she wasn't looking at him. She was looking at her hands. She knew the assets were being seized. She knew the house was gone. Judge Rebecca Lang looked down from the bench. "Vance Hargrove, you have disgraced your badge. You have terrorized the very people you swore to protect. You acted as a gang leader in uniform." The judge paused, shuffling his papers. "Sentencing will be set for next week, but given the severity of these crimes and the flight risk, bail is revoked. Marshals, take him into custody." Hargrove stood up. "No, wait, I can cut a deal. I have names. I know people at City Hall." "It's too late for that, Mr. Hargrove," Nia said from her table. She didn't stand up. She didn't need to. "You had a chance to be a decent human being. You chose to be a monster." 2 U.S. Marshals moved in. These weren't the sympathetic officers from his precinct. These were feds. They spun him around and cuffed him. As he was let out, the chains rattling, Hargrove looked back one last time. He looked for the fear he used to inspire in people. He looked for respect. He saw only Nia Whitaker packing her briefcase, already moving on to her next case. To her, he was no longer a problem. He was just a closed file. The sentencing hearing was a formality, but for Vance Hargrove, it was a funeral. He stood before Judge Lang, clad not in his crisp blue uniform, but in an ill-fitting orange jumpsuit that smelled of mildew and another man's sweat. His wrists, once used to snapping cuffs onto others, were shackled to his waist. "Mr. Hargrove," the judge said, peering over his spectacles, "you have requested leniency based on your years of service. But the court finds that your service was a facade. You used the badge as a shield for criminality. You destroyed lives, Kai Langford, Marcus Wallace, Sarah Jenkins, to feed your own ego and wallet." The judge slammed the gavel. "I sentence you to 25 years in a federal penitentiary. You will not be eligible for parole until you have served 85% of your sentence. Furthermore, under the civil asset forfeiture laws, the court orders the immediate seizure of your pension, your home, and all liquid assets to pay restitution to your victims. Hargrove's knees gave out. His pension, his safety net, the money he had promised his wife, was gone. He looked back at the gallery. His wife wasn't there. She had filed for divorce days after the guilty verdict. She had taken the kids and moved to her sister's in Ohio. He was alone. As the bailiffs hauled him away, he saw Nia Whitaker sitting in the front row. She wasn't smiling, she looked solemn. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't forgiveness, it was closure. Hargrove was transferred to a high-security federal penitentiary in California. He had hoped for a minimum security camp where white-collar criminals played tennis, but because of his ties to organized crime and trafficking, he was designated high risk. The karma hit the moment he stepped off the bus. "New fish!" a voice shouted from the yard. "Check it out, it's the super cop." Hargrove froze. News traveled fast in prison. They knew who he was. They knew he was the cop who planted evidence. He was processed by a guard who looked younger than Quinn. Hargrove tried to establish a rapport. "Hey, CO," Hargrove said, leaning in. "I was on the job 20 years, 4th precinct. We gotta look out for each other, right?" The guard looked at him with dead eyes. "You aren't a cop anymore. Inmate 894. Oh, you're just another number. Strip." The indignity of the strip search was the first blow. The second was his cell assignment. He was placed in general population. His lawyer had requested protective custody, but the paperwork had been delayed. A bureaucratic error that Hargrove suspected was Nia's doing, though he could never prove it. His cellmate was a man named Bishop. Bishop was 6'4", tattooed from neck to knuckles. Hargrove recognized the tattoos, the Aryan Brotherhood. Hargrove swallowed hard. "Hey, I'm Vance." Bishop didn't look up from his book. "I know who you are. You're the guy who likes to frame kids. You're the guy who sells women." Bishop stood up. "We have a code in here, 894. Oh, we don't like rats and we don't like cops, but we really don't like cops who have no honor." Hargrove spent the next months living in a state of perpetual terror. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat in the mess hall without checking his food for glass. He lost 50 pounds. The mountain of a man withered away into a ghost. He tried to file grievances. He tried to write letters to the warden. They were ignored. He was experiencing the exact system he had subjected others to, a system where nobody listened, nobody cared, and you were guilty until proven innocent. One afternoon in the yard, Hargrove was cornered by 3 inmates. He recognized one of them. It was a low-level dealer he had arrested years ago, not for a real crime, but because Hargrove needed to hit a quota. He had planted a pipe on him. "Officer Hargrove," the inmate smiled, cracking his knuckles. "Remember me? You told the judge I was a menace to society." Hargrove backed up against the fence. "Look, it was just business." "Yeah," the inmate said, pulling a shank made from a sharpened toothbrush. "This is just business, too." Hargrove wasn't killed. Death would have been too easy. He was beaten severely, broken ribs, a fractured jaw, and a shattered orbital socket. He spent weeks in the infirmary sipping broth through a straw. When he returned to his cell, he was a broken man. He spent his days staring at the concrete wall, replaying the moment he told Nia to get on her knees. He realized with a sickening clarity that that single moment of arrogance had cost him his entire life. He was no longer the law. He was nothing. While Hargrove was rotting in prison, Seattle was healing. Nia Whitaker didn't stop with the 4th precinct. She used the momentum from the Hargrove case to launch a statewide initiative called the Integrity Protocol. She removed Captain Thorne. He wasn't criminally charged, but his negligence made him unfit for command. He was replaced by Captain Maria Gonzalez, a tough-as-nails reformer who had come up through internal affairs. Nia set up a new review board entirely independent of the police department to investigate citizen complaints. She made body cam footage public record within 48 hours of any incident. But her most important work was with the victims. Months after the trial, Nia sat in a coffee shop in downtown Seattle. Across from her sat Kai Langford. He looked different than he had on the stand. He was wearing a clean shirt, and the haunted look in his eyes had faded slightly. "How are classes?" Nia asked, stirring her tea. Hard, Kai admitted, smiling. But I'm back in. The university reinstated my scholarship after you vacated the conviction. I'm studying pre-law now. Law? Nia raised an eyebrow. You want to be a lawyer after everything the system did to you? Because of what the system did to me, Kai corrected. And because of what you did for me. I want to be the kind of lawyer who stops the next Hargrove. Nia reached into her bag and pulled out a check. It was a settlement check from the city of Seattle. Damages for his wrongful imprisonment. It was for $2.5 million. This won't give you the years back, Kai, Nia said softly, but it will give you a future. Kai took the check. His hands shook. Tears welled up in his eyes. Thank you for believing me. Nobody ever believed me. I believed you, Nia said, and now everyone knows the truth. Years later, Nia Whitaker was up for a promotion. The Attorney General wanted her in D.C. She was being vetted for a federal judgeship. She walked through the doors of the 4th Precinct one last time. It felt different. The air was lighter. The officers at the front desk, a diverse mix of men and women, greeted her with genuine respect, not fear. She walked past the office where it had all happened. The name on the door was different. The vibe was different. She stopped at the bulletin board. There was a new photo up. It was a picture of the precinct basketball team, posing with local kids from the neighborhood. In the center of the photo, smiling, was Officer Quinn, now Sergeant Quinn. He saw her and walked over. He looked older, confident. Ms. Whitaker, Quinn said, shaking her hand. Just passing through, Nia smiled. How is the ship running? Tight, Quinn said. We got rid of the bad apples. The community actually talks to us now. We solved 3 homicides last month because witnesses weren't afraid to come forward. That's good to hear, Nia said. We still talk about it, you know, Quinn said quietly. The day you walked in here in that hoodie, you saved this precinct, ma'am. You burned it down to save it. Nia adjusted her coat. Sometimes, Sergeant, you have to break a bone to reset it properly. She walked out into the Seattle rain. She didn't put her hood up this time. She let the rain hit her face. It felt clean. Years later, a heavy steel door slid open. Vance Hargrove, now in his early 50s but looking decades older, shuffled into the visitation room. He sat down behind the thick glass. He picked up the phone. On the other side was a young woman. It was his daughter, Brooke. She was in her mid-20s now. He hadn't seen her since the arrest. Brooke, Hargrove rasped, his voice unused to speaking. Hello, Dad, she said. Her voice was cold, distant. I didn't think you'd come, he stammered. How is your mom? Mom is remarried, Brooke said bluntly. To a dentist in Ohio, she's happy. She doesn't have to worry about where the money is coming from anymore. Hargrove flinched. And you? I'm graduating soon, she said. That's great, honey. I'm so proud. Don't be, Brooke said. I changed my last name. I'm not Brooke Hargrove anymore. I'm Brooke Miller, Mom's maiden name. Hargrove felt a physical pain in his chest, sharper than the beating he had taken in the yard. Why? Because of the shame, Dad, she said, tears streaming down her face. Do you have any idea what it was like to have everyone know my father was a monster? To see the videos of you kicking that kid? To read about the women you trafficked? I did it for us, Hargrove pleaded, slamming his hand on the glass. I wanted you to have a good life. You did it for you, Brooke snapped. You loved the power, and now you have none. You're just a sad old man in a cage. She stood up. I just came to tell you that I'm getting married soon, she said, and my stepfather is walking me down the aisle. Brooke, please. Goodbye, Vance. She hung up the phone. Hargrove watched her walk away. He shouted. He banged on the glass, but the soundproof barrier swallowed his screams. The guard came over and grabbed him by the shoulder. Show's over, 8940. Back to your cell. Hargrove was dragged back to his concrete box. The heavy door slammed shut with a final echoing clang. He sat on his bunk, staring at the toilet. He thought about the hoodie. He thought about the rain. He thought about the woman he had underestimated. Nia Whitaker was somewhere out there changing the world, and he was here erasing himself from it one day at a time. The hammer had fallen, and it had crushed him completely. Vance Hargrove thought the badge made him a god. He thought he could judge a book by its cover, or, in this case, a chief prosecutor by her hoodie. He was wrong. This story isn't just about one bad cop getting caught. It's about the arrogance of power. Hargrove spent 20 years building a fortress of corruption, thinking he was untouchable. But it took one woman, one determined, brilliant woman who knew her rights and knew the law, to bring the whole thing crashing down. He lost his freedom, he lost his family, he lost his name. He died 1,000 deaths in that cell, not physically but spiritually, knowing that his own daughter was walking down the aisle with another man because she was too ashamed to carry his name. That is the true definition of karma. It doesn't just punish you, it erases you. The 4th precinct was cleaned up. Kai Langford got his life back, and Nia Whitaker proved that justice is blind, even if the people enforcing it aren't. What did you think of Nia's handling of the situation? Would you have kept your cool like she did, or would you have snapped? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, make sure to smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. And if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the bell notification. We drop new stories of karma, revenge, and justice every single week, and you do not want to miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you judge.